I will not lie to myself. Woes have settled in my misty heart. Why am I known as a charlatan? Why am I known as a brawler? I'm not a villain. I haven't robbed anyone in the forest. I haven't shot wretches in the dungeons. I'm merely a street rake, smiling at passing faces. I'm a mischievous Moscow playboy. In Svea, every neighborhood dog recognized my brassy gait in the back streets. Every bed-wrangled horse nods its head to greet me. I'm a friend to the animals, healing them with my verses. My top hat is not to impress the women. My heart can't bear meaningless passion. It makes it easier, soothing my sadness, to give gold oats to a mare. I have no friend among people. I'm loyal to a different kingdom. I'm ready to put my best tie on the neck of my local hound. Now I won't hurt any longer. Swamp is strained in my murky heart. This is why I'm known as a charlatan. This is why I'm known as a brawler. What you just heard was a poem from Sergei Yesenin. So I started looking at Yesenin when I did my video on Mayakovsky. Before the times of all the Hearts of Iron 4 players, so won't be any funny memes of this guy of modern day understanding for the young Sumer generations, but that doesn't stop me from looking at it, and if I find something interesting, I will always share it with you. I'm going to point out two things I found a bit interesting. So in Yesenin's later time, the Soviet Union had a mixed relationship to his text. Many actually did like it. It wasn't social realism, but it did explain the more peasant lifestyle, talking a lot about outside of the urban centers, and in many ways it's a romantic, idyllic vision of this. Many did like that, but for some reason Bukharin did not like it whatsoever, and Bukharin was actually one of the main reasons why Yesenin was later banned in the USSR, only coming back in 1966. And the other part is his death. So I'm gonna go into both of these a little bit more soon. But let's start with another small poem. Maples without leaves, maple covered in eyes, why do you stand, slumped down under the white blizzard? Do you see something, hear something, as if you were gone out for a walk outside the village, and like a drunk god out on the road, tumbled into a snowdrift and a frozen leg? These days I'm not so steady myself, headed back from drinking with my friends. I won't reach home. Here I meet a willow, there I meet a pine. In the howling blizzard, I sang them songs of summer. I seem to be the same sort of maple myself, except I'm completely green, not leafless. And 3 sheets to the wind lost the decorum. I hugged a birch as if it were another man's wife. So before I start talking about Bukharin and the Soviets, let me tell you what happened in his death. Yesenin's death is one of the most saddest stories of Russian history, and many Russians know about this. Yesenin was only 30 years old when he died, and he was in a state of depression. He was found dead in a hotel room in St. Petersburg. He wrote down his last poem, but there was no ink, so he wrote it down with his own blood. Farewell, my good friend, farewell. In my heart forever you'll stay. May the fated parting foretell that again we'll meet up someday. Let no word, no handshake ensue, no sadness browse in remorse. To die in this life is not new, and living's no newer, of course. Another big reason why this death is a bit romanticized is, in a way, people like to blame the Soviets for this. And I'm not talking about the Soviets getting him the depression, but many people think that he was murdered. And that's because of the Soviets' opinion on Yesenin, and the Soviet Union banning his work up until the 60s. And there might be something with this, but this correlates to Bukharin's opinion about Yesenin. Yesenin hanged himself in the early hours of the 28th of December, 1925. The blue-eyed cherub had become a hooligan and a drunkard. The peasant who wrote lovingly of the villages lived and died in the city. His outward bravado could not conceal his underlying sorrow and softness. One Soviet critic recently written, "The fate of Yesenin is unusually introductive. One can say of him that nobody's fame soared so high and was dragged so low in the tavern dirt, was totally hushed up and then resurrected again, like the phoenix from the ashes. For more than a quarter of a century, the poet's name was erased from everyday use. He was excused from all schools' curriculums. A whole generation of people grew up who had not heard of the name Yesenin. This state of affairs began to change only in the mid-1950s, and in 1965, upon the 70th anniversary of the poet's birth, the nation's love for Yesenin was manifest on a mass scale. If you followed the Mayakovsky story, you knew that him shooting himself could have caused a lot of copycats, and for Yesenin, this was correct as well. The wave of suicide directly or indirectly attributed to Yesenin's influence in 1926 was considerably important in blackening Yesenin's name throughout the Stalin era. By June 1962, he was becoming increasingly identified with various social evils described under the blanket term Yesenin in China. Several suicides occurred in Moscow. Following unhappy love affairs, several young communists hanged themselves after enthusiastically reading Yesenin's poetry. One group of 8 students decided to kill themselves. The campaign against Yesenin in China, in which Yesenin is often fully identified with the potential harmful aspects of his poetry, grew towards the end of 1926. A box of cuttings in the State Library Museum in Moscow shows how, throughout the Soviet Union, numerous articles were written with this phenomenon in the late 1926. And in 1927, Yesenitis was described as an ugly combination of chauvinism, pessimism, anti-Semitism, pornography, hooliganism, and general decadence. Mayakovsky made a speech on the harm caused of the Soviet poetry by the uncritical approach to Yesenin's tavern themes, although he was unwilling to identify Yesenin fully with evils of Yesenitis. Voronsky wrote to Gorky, "A campaign has been initiated against Yesenin. I do not approve of this." Another critic defended Yesenin in 1927. Yesenin never made a principle out of hooliganism or eroticism. He explains literally why he became a hooligan. He himself never said that hooligan was an ideal, that hooliganism was good. Yesenin's lyrical poetry was not pornography, nor the defense of hooliganism. After reading his verse, the most inverted, decadent, and pessimistic will fell a passionate desire to wring out of the garden of man. In 1931, Gorky declared somewhat more coolly in 1927, "Let us say frankly that Yesenin was not a high-quality writer. We need to use criticism, but there is no need to fear the likes of Yesenin." A volume of Yesenin's verses was allowed to be published in Moscow in 1931. Several people who played a role in Yesenin's life committed suicide. I hope this gives a bit of a clearer understanding of what happened and why they decided to ban the guy. One cannot deny the power of poetry. And if you remove all the poets, and if you remove the ability for people to express themselves, the few that can will become so much more. Because who else are you supposed to read? And before we end this video, I'm going to read one last poem for you. You don't love me, you don't pity me, I'm not at least bit beautiful. Not looking at my face, you tremble with passion, with your hands on my shoulder. Young one with your sensual smile, I'm not tender with you, nor rude. Tell me, how many have you caressed? How many hands do you remember? How many lips? I know, they all passed like shadows, never touched your heat. You sat on many knees, and now you're sitting on mine. So what if your eyes are half closed, and you're thinking of someone else, drowning in farewell memories? I don't love you that much myself. I do not adore faith. Shadow is this fairly liaison. Just as I met you by accident, I was part of you with a smile. You'll continue your own path, burning through your joyless days. Just don't touch the unkissed. Don't lure the unburned. You're walking with someone else, down an alley, chatting of love. Perhaps I too will go out for a walk, and we'll meet again. Turning your shoulders closer to him, you heed a little boat. You will quietly say to me, "Good evening," and I will answer, "Good evening, miss." And nothing will rattle the soul. Nothing will make it tremble. Who has loved cannot love again. Who has burned cannot be set on fire. I was actually supposed to end it here, but I found something very interesting. Leon Trotsky. Leon Trotsky wrote for the Pravda in January 1926 about Yesenin. This is fascinating. So if you want to know Leon Trotsky's view on Sergei Yesenin, here you have it. We lost Yesenin, the fine poet, so genuine and so lovely a freshness. He's gone by his own will, saying farewell in his own blood to an unknown friend. Perhaps us all. His last line was striking in the tenderness and gentleness. He left life without crying out that he had been offended, without a pulse of protest, without slamming doors, but closing them quietly with a hand which blood was flowing. Because of this gesture, an unforgettable aura of farewellness illuminates an image of Yesenin as a man and as a poet.